Hello, I'm Jeff Morris, professor at Texas A&M University. I'd like to share an observation from my classroom experience that sheds light on how seemingly neutral computer applications have an unnoticed influence on our aesthetics and creativity. Since my university-level courses on technology-based music often attract students with little background in classical music, I routinely encounter teachable moments when I gently correct a student and take time to explain to the class that a given piece of music should not be referred to as a song. They just don't know what else to call a piece of music. This innocent label betrays a significant cultural barrier to receiving new forms of musical expression. An unfamiliar work of abstract music is at a significant disadvantage when it reaches uninitiated listeners. If every piece of audio content is a song, and if a given composition lacks song-like features, then that would make it a bad song, and therefore it wouldn't be worth study or appreciation. Now, it's true we encounter a lot of actual songs in life for good reasons, such as in elementary school, celebrating holidays, and informal ceremonies. In commercial advertisements, using a song just makes for effective communication design. We'll talk about these things in a bit, but there's one other influencing factor that seems to go unnoticed, and it's important that we don't let things like this slip past us. The many software applications we use to play and stream audio content have used the word song to describe any of its content, musical or not. These are ubiquitous software applications, including Apple Music, iTunes, Windows Groove Music, and streaming services like Spotify and even iHeartRadio, whose content is heavy in spoken word podcasts. Now, more recently, some applications have found ways to avoid labeling content, and if they can tell it's a podcast, then they might have started using the term episode instead. But you can still find things wrongfully called songs in places, and it's been this way for decades. It's easy to imagine how this came about. A software developer wanted to make an application that plays music files. There needs to be some way to store and display the title of the music being played. So a data field or a column gets labeled as song title. No one notices or cares enough at the time to ask, what do we do about this string quartet? And then before you know it, people use it to store and play sound recordings of things other than music, such as stand-up comedy routines, lectures, and sermons. And as the software adds features, it lets you add videos and text files too. U2's liner notes for the album Songs of Innocence were included in iTunes as a PDF file alongside the actual songs on the album. And before you know it, the word song almost starts to mean thing, as in the thing that is currently being played by the software that was originally designed to play songs. My students and the rest of our culture have been immersed in this way of slinging content around for decades, and so I don't blame them. However, this realization did make me notice some important things that we're missing out on as a result. So what makes something appropriate to call a song? At this point, I ask my students to pause and think of a verb that humans do that's like the word song. It comes from the same verb to sing, so at its heart, something called a song should be sung, or at least singable, as in instrumental songs. So what makes music singable? I like to take my time with this, seeing what aspects I can guide students to notice. But first, a singable tune must be made of pitched sounds. Remember, I'm teaching electronic music, and we're listening to Stockhausen, so limiting ourselves to pitched sounds isn't an obvious choice, and it rules out a lot of creative possibilities right from the start. To be singable, those pitched sounds need to be in a certain pitch range, much more limited than what a piano can play, for example, and whether the tune is set in the treble end or the bass end of the human singable pitches, it needs to stay there, limiting the pitch range even further, often to little more than 1 octave. What else? Usually my students will get to an observation like, it can't be all over the place. We can unpack a few things from this. First, having a lot of leaps makes a melody harder to follow. Bach and Bacharach have pulled it off, and it doesn't make them bad songs, but it does make them more difficult to sing, which might make them bad song choices for a public sing-along. We'll come back to that later. So anyway, a melody usually needs to be mostly conjunct without a lot of leaps in pitch. A singable tune also shouldn't be all over the place in time. It should be constantly present in order to earn its place in the foreground of our attention. More on that later. Although also, in order to suit human physiology well, it should have occasional brief pauses when it's time to breathe, or when a musical idea has come to a close. Often both happen at the same time. Finally, a singable tune can't be all over the place in terms of ideas. It needs to be coherent, repeating or at least evolving just a few musical ideas in a straightforward and organized way, or else it'll shake listeners loose. A sensible metric organization helps too. A short, repeating metric hierarchy helps us catch on to the structure easily, and danceable beats help as well. Not too fast or too slow for our bodies to move to, and preferably grouped in multiples of 2 to match our feet. So what makes something worth calling a song? Can we state it briefly? In short, I like to borrow a term from science and say that a song is optimized for the human scale, including physiological matters like singable pitch range and danceable beats, as well as cognitive matters like pattern recognition and memory. So, a song is maximally accessible for the generalized human scale. This is the crux of the issue when students conceive a division between music they have to learn in school and music they choose to play for themselves, which they might even refer to as real music or good music informally. In a way, the effectiveness of a song in serving goals outside of music has backfired against the learning of music itself. Music is all around us, but most of it is serving goals outside of music rather than challenging us, giving us opportunities to grow as music makers and music listeners. Music is a form of human expression, though, and we're missing out on too much of it if we're discounting music that isn't song-like. A song isn't the only kind of music, just like a sandwich isn't the only kind of food. Close your eyes and imagine this sandwich. Here's the first bite. Banana? That's a surprise, but it could work in a sandwich. Another bite. Chocolate. Okay, this is going to be a very sweet sandwich, but I've heard of that before. But why is this sandwich cold? Like ice cold? This sandwich isn't turning out well. And why do I have to eat it with a spoon? This is a terrible sandwich. You see what I did there. A banana split, an ice cream sundae, is a terrible sandwich, just like Stockhausen's Kontakte is a bad song. Students are taken aback when I declare that it's a bad song, but you see what I mean. This doesn't mean it's bad music. It's only bad if you look for song-like properties. Carline's wasn't in it for the likes and subscribes. Here's another example for you, quickly. Close your eyes and take a bite. This one's meaty. That's promising. And it's a hot sandwich. Here's some juicy tomato flavor, nice. And some cheese, all right. But the bread, it's really wet and soggy and stringy. And why is it wrapped around a fork? Even though spaghetti and meatballs, pizza, desserts, and so on can be appreciated as much as a sandwich, the song dominates our cultural attention and value. However unintentionally, unnecessarily, and unfortunately, leaving most of our culture to miss out on music's full expressive potential. So, a song isn't the only kind of music, just like a sandwich isn't the only kind of food. I've discovered with my students that songs and sandwiches have a lot in common. For example, they both stick to well-established and familiar structures. They both rely heavily on a set of ingredients that are almost always available. Most kitchens will contain bread, protein, and condiments, as most musicians will have access to a keyboard, guitar, or drums. And they're both easy to take in while doing other things, like driving, studying, or socializing. Also important, this is not a statement about quality. It is possible for some songs and sandwiches to provide profound experiences and justify extreme prices or waiting in long lines. Both a brilliant song and a brilliant sandwich could be a life-changing experience or make someone's career. In my classes, I usually have to settle for encouraging students to refer to music that is not song-like as a piece, a work, or perhaps a composition if it was composed, or improvisation or performance if it would be more appropriate, or simply as the music. We're at a loss for useful terms unless we refer to more specific aspects, as in improvisation or performance, or specific genre names. Terms like aria, tone poem, fugue, processional, and divertimento reveal the many ways that music has integrated into culture. Using genre labels to acknowledge and discuss historical, cultural function facilitates reflection on the many ways in which music is integrated into our current culture. Even music that we could justly call songs could more precisely be described as ballads in the storytelling sense, hymns, dances, divertimenti, overtures, fanfares, and so on, which can promote awareness of our own culture. Rediscovery of applicable terms from historical music makes our cultural heritage more accessible, and it also allows us to see where new terms are truly needed, where music enters our lives in yet new ways. Software design plays a role here too. Look in the genre menu in any music playing or streaming software, and you'll see genres like classical, country, electronic, and Latin American. But all of these kinds of music have their own approaches to dance music, love songs, ballads as in the storytelling songs, and so on. Most of our music software uses the term genre when it should use the term style. The term genre is related to genus, as in genus and species, so you could say each different genre is like a different animal. I encourage students to consider genre by thinking about the shape of the musical situation and what musical properties suit it best. Social dance music is for people to socialize, not to focus on the music, so successful dance music has a continuous, steady beat, a lot of repetition, and few, if any, words, maybe just enough to set the mood like a hype man or a party DJ. This is so the lyrics don't interfere with your talking with friends. This is generally true for dance music as a genre, whether you're playing it with violins, fiddles, violines, or synth strings. Those are stylistic choices with their own connections to culture. In contrast to dance music, a ballad, the storytelling song, would reward sitting still and paying attention to the words all the way through, and it can afford some rhythmic irregularities to serve the text, and some bursts or pauses for dramatic effect. Our students and other listeners who only know songs and not other kinds of music are missing out in big ways regarding our past, present, and future. What if we all recognized that most music we hear in everyday life would best be called a divertimento, just an amusing background or decoration, rather than being the only worthwhile kind of music and the only way to take it in? What if we all recognized that it wasn't just any old songs, but rather processionals that accompany some of life's biggest moments, like graduations, weddings, and funerals? What if we all recognized that different cultures bring their own styles to music, but that many of them actually share the same genres, using music with common properties suited to dance, worship, and contemplation? An awareness of style and genre as two separate things, as well as the musical properties that support each, keeps listeners in touch with the cultural heritage and societal values that matter most in each musical situation, and they discover how rich the potential of music is to express and support those values in many ways. In the present moment, listeners coming to classical music who are only prepared to hear songs are likely to miss what substance the composition has to offer. Imagine a friend brings you to a football game and you know nothing about it. You've never heard of it. You sit in the stadium seat and you look where? Straight ahead, like you do in any seat. And what do you see? just more people like you. Well, that's pointless. Football is worthless. It's a waste of time. That's because you don't know where to look, and you're missing all the action. There's a series of revelations to be had for those who invest patience and attention. Once our budding football fans learn to watch the field rather than look straight ahead, they might go through successive realizations like, well, it's just a bunch of people running around on this green square. And then, well, it's just two groups of people running in opposite directions. At some point, they will realize, oh, there's a ball, and each group tries to move the ball in opposite directions. Eventually, they may be able to appreciate how skillfully players are able to move the ball past their opponents. Now they're able to get something out of the experience, to take something away from it. To serve the future, we can encourage our students and listeners to use these words more carefully, so the software developers among them can recognize how seemingly simple design decisions can unintentionally shape culture in this way, and so the creators among them can be more aware of how their tools unintentionally influence their thought processes. We owe it to our students, to ourselves, to each other, and to our fellow humans to make this point, or at least to bring listeners closer to a point where they can start to question their assumptions. After all, if all you do is make what people can only see as being bad songs, then what good is that to anyone?